Okay, it being June 8th at 6:20, I bring the land use meeting to order. And the first item is approving the minutes of the March 9th. Has everybody had a chance to review them?
Yep.
And is there a motion?
So moved.
Great, second?
Second.
Great, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
You'll need to poll.
Aye.
Yep.
And
Vincent, aye. Sarah?
That's an aye.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
the minutes of March 9th are approved unanimously. Max, you are up.
I don't really have much to go on. Bill can,
Yeah, we can start, do you want to start with section 9, roads,
Yep,
parking, driveway, and traffic access? Probably the best way to do this is just go page by page, as we go through. Most of this remains the same from the current ordinance. I just want to preface this with, there's a couple of areas where we use the term under site plan review, and we're changing the nomenclature of that, so we'll go back and change that to planning board review. And that occurs a couple times here, and I'm sure it occurs in other sections of the ordinance also. So if we just start on page 1, it's section 9.1, traffic impact analysis. This deals with how we delineate permits and the types of access points a little later on in section 9.2. We require an analysis under 50 or more vehicle trips or 100 vehicle trips during the AM or PM peak hour requires a traffic analysis.
50 parking spaces.
50 parking spaces, excuse me, yeah, and 100 vehicle trips during the AM or PM peak hours.
Are peak hours defined?
No, peak hours would be determined based on the business. Usually, it's a morning and evening, but the morning and evening hours will vary. We usually look at the trip generation manual for that.
Okay, so that's a reference to that.
Yep. And the 203 issue is cited because we have a copy of that here in the office. So.
Does that get periodically updated? Should we reference or newest edition or something?
It does, but this version is adequate for us. Yeah,
okay.
it would be adequate.
Bill, just a quick question. They say section 7 and 9, the two handouts that we got recently, those are supposed to be article 9, correct?
Right, yeah. Yeah, use the term article. On a couple of these, I call them sections, but they are articles. Just moving on to 9.2, it's titled Street Access, Driveway, Street and Road Construction Standards. There's a lot here. We define different types of driveway access based on the volume of traffic. And then we have access and location connectivity, various rules about how the driveways are supposed to be sited, site distances, when there's different connections, particularly on frontage when you're on two streets, would be the preference for them. And then clearance, basically, if depending on the speed, what the site distance is for right to your right or to your left, vehicle alignment, that would be the slope coming in or out of a driveway, and then access location and spacing. This would designate how far away a driveway will need to be from an intersection, and the chart delineates if it has a signal or not signaled. And then there's access spacing. That's so that driveways or access ways are not have to be a particular distance from each other to avoid conflicts of traffic coming in and
So I
out
have
of
a
them.
question on that. Like on Route 1, is there any way you can make a provision to like where the dollar store is next to the next building, I mean, having a behind
Yes,
access?
that's actually in here.
Okay,
Yeah, what we can do, and we talked about this in the two commercial districts, is to put it in there to require at the time of the permit or the application that they specify a connection, between those on that. So they don't have to go out back into the street. Just as a note, these standards here would not cover Route 1 or Route 32. They're covered under state standards.
Okay, that was gonna be my
They mirror
next-
these.
Yep.
They may be a little stricter in a couple of areas, but they're a little stricter in terms of the number of access points that
Yep.
they allow onto a business, so.
I have a question on the 9.2.6.1 acceleration.
Yep,
Is there an assumed rate of acceleration involved in that? So some people have heavier foot than others?
yeah, that's one of those, provisions in the ordinance that isn't tied, it's not tied to an exact engineering standard, so there's very,
Well,
it's there to generate discussion about how well, how the driveway would function in terms of,
yeah, but I guess my concern was is if there's, any board that is hearing these things needs to have some, where you have provisions like this, there needs to be a standard.
yeah.
And, that's ambiguous to me.
I agree with you. Yeah,
I mean, maybe it has to be in there, but I think it's meaningless.
no, it doesn't. It could be taken out. It could be taken out. The reason you could be taken out is that if they meet the site distance, then they should have adequate
Right.
view on that, coming out. And then this presupposes that we've determined that the access point is safe to go out, traffic is safe to go out.
Those are finite standards.
Yeah, and this one is,
I mean, and it could just be a source of whatever at some point.
So are you planning on removing it?
I would say take it out, because I don't have anything to back this up. Again, we back it up because of site distance, we back it up when we look at the traffic amount on the road that you were turning onto the traffic and,
Yeah, and what's the speed limit on that they have, right?
yeah.
I mean, and the section immediately beneath that I assume operating speed is the posted speed limit.
Posted speed limit.
Yeah. And, so that's all.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's the posted speed limit. And, we usually practically look at, how fast the traffic is going and whatever. On the state routes, if we have a high traffic generator that's gonna put a driveway out there, say it's a large shopping center or something like that, that's when they'll have to work with the state to do a study to see if a light is required.
Or reduce speed limits or.
Right, or some sort of a deceleration or acceleration lane.
Yeah.
Or something like that, yeah. Or even prohibiting left-hand turns or, and pushing the left-hand turn lane to a separate driveway where they have better sight distance or something like that. The state doesn't like to put in signals, traffic signals.
Right. And then on the third page here,
Yep,
at the, fourth page, excuse me, where standards cannot be met.
yep.
I mean, these all relate to commercial, industrial,
Oh, this would be anything. There are times,
because that could be a residential.
could be residential, yeah.
Okay. I know special cases.
It occurs, a lot of times, the state does the same thing when they issue access permits, is they will they will allow a low-volume access point when there's no other alternative.
What happens, like we have the Dunkin' Donuts in town, which
Yeah.
kind of is an
The
issue.
queue line, yeah.
Yeah, the queue line, but also the turn
Traffic
radius. And so is there like an as-built standard, or, I mean, somebody can show anything.
Yeah, that was a pre-existing, yeah, condition, yeah, yeah, where we could use the, see, there we would use the state would be the
Okay.
jurisdiction. And if they expanded, then they would have to get a new traffic permit. And they would look at that, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because that's a problem with,
It's a problem in a number of different
there's
ways.
just not enough room
Right.
for the traffic to queue, yeah.
Just going back to the special case thing, what's this page, maybe 8 here? In section 9.2.12.4. It says special case driveways are one or two-way drives serving medium or high-volume uses. Now, it seems to me that a residential, single-family residence, would not be a medium or high-volume use. It would be so, that's why I asked that question.
All right.
So,
That would be, that's where we would require, where it says, with partial access, right turn only permitted.
partial, where's that?
Special case drives are one-way or two-way driveway serving medium high value use with a
Yeah.
partial access
Right.
only permitted.
I mean, it maybe it'd be appropriate to, serving any use, any volume. If you really intended to apply to single-family residences.
I see what you mean, yep. Gotcha. Going back to page, or section 9.2.8.2. And the number of access points. Again, the state will dictate the number on the state routes.
I mean, the table's pretty clear.
Yeah.
And so for site plan review, do they have to go to the state before and bring all that to?
Yeah, before, typically, they either do it continuous, or we usually tell them to go first.
Yeah.
Get this ironed
Okay.
out. Because there could be cases that would affect their whole
Yeah.
front layout, yeah. That gets more problematic or more critical at a high volume, high traffic volume use on that. And then construction materials and paving, 9.2.10. There's a requirement there, commercial driveways are paved within 30 feet of the street right of way. That's particularly to allow traffic entering from the street to the driveway to get off quicker in. And also to make your exit more safer, quicker.
Are there any material alternatives to bituminous concrete? I mean, that's basically asphalt, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if someone wanted to put in a concrete,
Oh, yeah, we would allow, yeah.
I mean, would they have to ask for an exception for that, or?
No, we would just ask that, we would want to see them use an accepted standard. We'd probably refer it to the state.
Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine people doing that because of the cost, but,
No, but they could use reclaim or something.
Well, that would be-
I mean, after the 30
Yeah.
feet, then, because that's kind
No,
of
this would
typical.
be, you do have concrete used in some commercial applications
Yeah.
for a lot of reasons.
It's more durable.
More durable, or
Yeah,
they're using a product that's caustic to the asphalt or something, so we use high-strength concrete.
Could I ask a question?
Yes,
In 9.2.8.1, minimum quarter clearance,
yep,
could you educate me, what does that mean?
hang on for a second. 9.2,
8-1.
Dot 8.1.
oh, corner clearance, yeah. That's where you have corner provides practical based on the minimum clearance based on accessing.
Can't hear you.
No, I'm just reading it. If you go to the chart, what that does is that tells you how far away the driveway needs to be, depending on the type of the driveway, from an intersection.
Okay,
So it varies if it has a signal or unsignalized.
I got it. So just
That's all.
distance from the intersection.
Yep,
Okay,
that's what it is,
understand.
yeah. And it just tells you how to measure it, from the point of, from the corner to the point of tangency for the access, that's all.
Okay.
There's something in there on queuing. The queuing capacity is gonna be based on the particular use. And the Gas and Goes, the Dunkin' Donuts have, that's where or the McDonald's have a high queuing capacity. Banks can also do that, for the drive-ins at times, so.
right.
Some other businesses are modest, so we would have to look at what the proposal is, and,
Well, I mean, a good example of that is a Dunkin' Donuts.
Every morning.
When I'm familiar. What?
Every morning.
Right, I mean, down near my office in Massachusetts, there's a Dunkin' Donuts, and, there's a big line into the drive-through, and usually there's 4 or 5 cars out on the street.
yeah.
So, I mean, I guess this means that they would have to design a path, a driveway that would
Large enough.
accommodate that, yeah.
And that basically that would preclude some sites because they wouldn't have enough room.
Right.
Yeah.
Bill, there was a question, the sections we're going over right now, like the vehicle queuing, is that something that we are adding in on our own, or is that a state requirement?
What section came next?
Well, like vehicle queuing, for example, is this just a brand new, this is what you just read?
Oh, the vehicle queuing, yeah.
Yeah, is this something brand new that we are putting in,
No,
or is this
no.
a state item?
No, this is not this is, if it occurs on a state route, they're gonna look at the queuing, but if it's, we also have a role in that also on that. So they might get a permit from, an approval from the state, but we'll probably still look at that.
So some of these new items that we're looking at are mostly state items, is what the question is.
I wouldn't say they're state items, but they're just typical access control kind of concerns on that. We don't designate a minimum queue spaces or anything like that because it varies greatly. It varies quite a bit. When we have a high user, we typically we try to find the standard for what's typical and then match what they're proposing. And use our own experience,
it's a clear standard there,
yeah,
that you can't have cars lined up on the
lined
street.
up on the street, yeah.
So, so how you determine that's the,
We would know how many, if we know their trip generation at peak hour, we know how many vehicles are coming there. So we can say, all right, for that peak hour, say between 6:30 and 7:30, wherever it is, you have X amount of vehicles. So we can just use that as the jumping off point for, all right, it takes you 5 minutes for a customer to go through, or 10 minutes. So we have an idea of how many vehicles
Yeah.
will be queued from there, so. Does that make sense to?
Yeah, no, I just, the only difficulty I see with that is that 10 years after an application's approved,
Yeah, I was gonna say, you're guessing.
Well, yeah,
This is-
well, we're not guessing, because we're basing it on, the traffic data is real-time data, and now the only thing that can occur, they can expand their business. And then hopefully when they expand, or if they expand, we have to take a look at that,
Right.
that whole thing again,
but you could also have just an increased population density over
Yeah,
many years.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't think there's any way to,
And that's possible too.
sometimes not so many.
Yeah,
No, sometimes not so many, yes.
or we'll do it like they do in Massachusetts and put a Dunkin' Donuts on every corner.
it's 6 miles from my condominium to my office, and there are, I think there are 5 Dunkin' Donuts.
Moving on to section 9.2.12, construction standards for driveways. This details the various, the angles, the curb radii, the width, suggested width. Many times, we have suggested widths in here for two-way driveways, single driveways. Most of the time, these are the bare minimum. There are occasions when people will need to exceed them, depending on the type of vehicles that are coming in and out. If they're, a lot of tractor trailers, if they're moving boats in and out, they'll need a wider driveway width on that.
And a larger radius.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And typically, there's not a problem with that at all. That's,
That's pretty clear, so.
yeah. General requirements on the 9.2.13, general requirements for streets and roads. Again, this is basic performance standards for road design.
And I got out of this that any driveway that services 3 residences is considered a road.
Is considered a road, that's
Yeah,
correct.
yeah.
It'd be a low-volume road, but yeah. And that's what triggers the E911 designation too.
Yeah. That was all, that's all pretty clear.
On 9, there's design standards in here for the road. And then there's construction standard, the thickness of aggregate, base course, sub-base, and bituminous pavement. Our ordinance doesn't, it requires roads to be paved. So that's something you may or may not want to allow. Gravel roads, we haven't done that, so.
Well, you might, you're thinking about a driveway that's deemed a
No,
road.
not, the driveways would be different.
Well, but if you have a driveway that's deemed a road because of 3
Right,
residences.
if it's over 3, then it's a road, but if it's under, that could be a gravel.
Okay.
Road driveway.
So if it's over 3, we require it to be paved?
Yeah.
And why? Right now, I know of 2 roads in town that are not paved, and they have private associations, and they seem to work very well.
Oh, that's why I mentioned that, yeah.
Yeah,
A well-constructed gravel road is more than adequate, particularly for residential use.
That's what I would think.
So if you want to do that, we can add in the construction standards, we can still keep this and then put a separate columns for gravel, if it's going to be a finished gravel road.
Yeah, and I think that as long as they provide that they have some type of road commissioner or something that's going to maintain
If it's
it.
a private road, we require.
Yeah, I thought I saw that, read
Yeah,
that
that's in
somewhere.
there.
What section are we talking here?
This is the table design standards on 9.2 .14.9.
Okay.
And construction standards on
Okay.
9.2.15.
I want to go back to the design standards,
Sure.
the solar energy.
Oh, I'm glad somebody picked that up, yeah.
Because it looks as if the point there is to have streets run east-west.
Yeah.
And so the corollary to that might be that buildings on
Yeah.
plots might be required to be cited. And, I'm not sure we want to do that.
I would recommend taking that out, so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
It's just not practical.
yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, considering the topography and,
yep. I mean, in urban areas, we build in a grid pattern, so it's not practical
Right.
to have,
it just, in a semi-rural area, it just
Yeah.
makes no sense to me.
And then we can add the gravel. If you want, we can add just a provision there.
Oh, that's just my
Yeah,
suggestion.
I think that'd be a good idea, yeah.
Yeah, typically for the gravel, the base course and the sub-base course are adequate here, but for the finish course, the gravel has to have some fines in it, so it'll compact
Yeah.
down, so.
Okay, so we're back to design standards. I mean,
Design
those
standards, yeah.
are all,
Most of those are pretty boilerplate.
I mean, it's all,
Minimum grade, sidewalk widths,
yeah.
they're required in the urban compact area sidewalks.
We have a lot of our arterial roads here in Waldeboro. So.
Yeah.
We can't name a street after a given name of a person?
Is that in here?
A common name of a given name of a person, yeah. 9.2.16.
That was taken.
One of the things with these maps is I can't lick my finger and,
I know, I find the same thing.
point 16.
9.2.16, third from,
9.2.16.
yeah, no street
I would,
name should be the common name
I
given.
would take that out because we have an E911 standard, so we don't need this.
No, and we do have Lois Lane in town, which
Yeah,
is
I
a
know.
cute name.
Oh, good grief. Yeah.
Clark Kent lives there, I assume?
Or Agony or Controversy Lane.
Yeah, I love that. Poverty Lane.
All these private roads that, so some of them are very interesting.
I know.
Yes, and it lends some character.
Yep.
Yep, I agree.
I think the mayor of Washington DC decided that she would handle renaming the road.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, they painted
Yeah,
on the roof.
great way to do it.
I'm glad you caught that. I thought. I looked right at it and didn't see it. We will add a standard for the finish gravel too. So in section where we have some of the standards for the sub-base,
Yeah.
base, there'll be one for for a gravel road, the finish one.
And is it somewhere else to have a road commissioner for those types of roads that are not accepted by the town, but are,
We have it in here that, where is it today?
because I remember seeing it in our current regs, but
Yeah, it's also in here too. Where did I see it? Just went by it.
oh, yeah, the, on 9.2.4,
Yeah,
I think,
it's way up.
yeah. Yeah, it has to be in the deed.
Yeah. Now, there's also provisions, creation of residential street road. There's also provisions in statute that designate how to form a,
Yep,
but that's different from prescribing that they have to have one. In the subdivision ordinance, we require that. too.
Okay.
If it's a subdivision road, yeah. But some of those roads, particularly the three serving a small number that don't go for subdivision, they kind of evolve over time. It's
Yeah.
good to have that.
yeah.
There's also provision, we have 2 street connections. And we said may be required to have at least 2 street connections.
Where are we here?
It's 9.2.14.8.
Okay, yeah.
As long as it's may, because many times, sometimes it's appropriate to have the 2 connection, and other times it's,
Well, I mean, that makes sense in terms of emergency vehicle access.
well, the only time that's germane, that we've, in the real world, is if there's something that we're serving there, like a school or hospital.
Yeah,
But if it's a residential subdivision, very rarely is a road block that would block. So it's just not that terribly necessary. But it's not a bad idea, particularly, at least to put the allowance for a road to go in case someone expands the subdivision, and then, so you have like you said, a connection that could be.
I mean, but the operative verb there is may, so, it's, and that
It's
would,
a good thing to at least get that discussion going. Because a lot of times it's a question of, is there a place to connect to? So. And then we have I'm just going on to grades, section 9.2.14.11, intersection and site distances.
I mean, again, that's if people don't
Yep.
drive onto the public way blind.
If sidewalks, and then the standard for sidewalks, if they're supposed to be put in in the urban compact area.
Site distances, for example, on Friendship Road where I live, the road goes like this, and, coming up the street, you might be able to see something 1,000 feet away, but a vehicle will dip under.
Yeah.
I don't know how there's any way to deal with that.
That's where we do the best
Yeah,
special circumstance. We try you have to balance safety in these cases, and also particularly it's a low-volume driveway for the ability of a person to use their property. I mean, sometimes they can push the driveway to a better position on the lot or share a driveway, but oftentimes they can't, so
right, I mean, if the lot, this way, if the peak,
Yep,
then you put the driveway
driveway there,
at the
yeah.
peak.
Maximize whatever site
Yeah,
distance you
yeah.
can, yeah. We don't do a lot of shared driveways here, at least shared openings. A lot of places you share the first 25 or 30 feet, and then 2 or 3 driveways come in, so that's always an option. It's just not something that we typically use here. And then the section goes on to the next page where we have the minimum construction materials for the road, and some specific things about the side slopes, specific designations for how the aggregates for the base and sub-base, what standards they meet to meet. We use MDOT standards for their bituminous concrete. Which is a fairly high standard.
Again, with your private road accessing, 3 or 4 residences, the standards aren't as high, so.
Yep. Yeah, there's something there about not backing out into a street. Some sort of area to allow the vehicle to
Turn around.
Yeah. That's a small thing, but it makes a big impact.
So do we have anything in the regs? I'm assuming the code officer checks this, but should there be something with the road foreman to?
Yeah, if it's a road, we typically will ask for a professional engineer to certify.
Okay.
And if it's a subdivision road, there's stages of inspection
Okay.
that they have to meet, yeah. Code officer, public works, and
Yep.
and they're responsible to hire a PE, an engineer to
Okay.
verify it. That's a critical step.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then moving on to section 9.3.2, additional requirements for commercial and industrial standards, visibility, loading facilities, some landscaping requirements. I mean, basically, for loading, we want to make sure the loading takes place on the lot, that the trucks can get onto the site and don't have to back up out into the road, which happens a lot, unfortunately.
Wouldn't that be covered under the general performance standards, the buffer zones and whatnot?
Yeah, yes, there's some the landscaped area here, yeah. Yeah, and that does duplicate some of that.
To cover the possibility that the standards might be inconsistent.
Yeah, it's probably good to take them out of here and keep them in there.
Yeah.
Because they'll get lost in here.
Yep.
This is 9.3 we're on, or?
9.3.2.4. And then there's on the next page, design standards for the parking area. Most of this is pretty boilerplate.
Vehicle stacking, what's? I don't think that means what I visualize.
Basically, you want to get vehicles into the parking lot so they don't back up out to.
Oh, that's your queue.
Well, the queue line, usually we use that for, a pickup or a drive-through kind of thing. And stacking is when, just getting them into the parking lot.
Right.
That's a big problem in many high-volume parking lots. People get in and then they stop and make a choice to go, and they block the intersection very quickly.
Or they drive round and round trying to find the space closest to the door.
Yep. In Waterville, it's an old commercial area that had J.C. Penney and Kmart and Hannaford, the turnpike, and that was famous for just blocking that intersection. It's a four-way intersection there, because people would go in and they would just hesitate from where to go.
Just so everyone is aware, Sarah left because she still couldn't hear that well. So Sarah Hotchkiss left the meeting. So I think now we don't have a quorum. I think we're at 4 people. So just keep that in mind. Yeah, we're doing motion, but we did the minutes already.
Yep.
Yeah. require parking, striping. There's parking stalls, depending on the angle, you know, the width, skew width, depth. What the minimum size would be. Most of this is pretty boilerplate. And then the last thing is the number of required parking spaces based on the type of use. And we also have on the last thing on the chart said, other uses not listed, sufficient spaces to accommodate normal parking demand as determined by the planning board. And just so you know, in the downtown area, we don't have a parking standard,
Because we don't have enough
we don't have
parking
enough.
spaces.
which happens a lot.
Yeah.
These ones that are expressed in a fraction, they get round to the next highest, or?
Yeah. Usually, the ones that are, you have a fraction are you typically, industrial, I think, is there.
Well, art gallery, you know,
Yeah.
6.5, that caught my eye, so.
Oh, 6 point, oh, that's, yeah, all right. Usually, those are high volume, you know, parking space. I'm surprised the art gallery one was there. Usually the industrial one, we always have 1.3. Yeah,
They were thinking-
1.5,
Art gallery like the Farnsworth Art Gallery, not,
yeah.
Yeah,
Are these all state standards?
No, they're not state standards. These are just basic engineering standards. If you go to any ordinance, you're gonna find the same thing throughout the country. They're pretty boilerplate for the most part.
Got it, okay.
yeah, the art gallery and the museum is the same
Same
standard.
thing.
yeah.
Yeah,
Because I think a small art gallery is more like a retail space.
yeah.
What we don't have in some towns include a provision to allow modifications to be considered for the parking standards depending on the particular use or something like that. You may have a manufacturing facility that takes up a lot of square footage, but only uses a minimal, you know, a number of employees, just as an example.
No, you go ahead.
I was gonna say, I kind of hesitate to let them make modifications.
Well, they
Here.
would,
They
they
have
would
to-
request, they would have, would
Yeah.
request, yeah. It would be based on, they would have to show,
Yeah,
some do that, some don't. There's a tension between making the parking adequate and then requiring an overabundance of parking that won't be utilized.
If I can just ask a question, because back when, American Unagi, for example,
Yeah.
the land-based appeal people, when they came to the planning board, according to this, they would have had to have, I think, 1.5 by 1,000 square foot for parking space.
Right,
So they would have been required to have, I think, 40 parking spaces.
Yeah.
Based on the size of the building.
yeah.
But they weren't gonna have anywhere near that number of employees, so if they asked to reduce it, so how would that work?
That would be something, you know, worthwhile putting in to this section of the ordinance to say the parking standards may be modified when the applicant can be, because that
so, but then that begs the question, so let's say they move out and a different manufacturing comes in and they need that parking. Can they modify it and at least show that it's possibility if there's
Oh,
a
yeah.
change of use?
if somebody goes in and they're actually gonna, you know, increase the density, they would have to install the parking.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Where we have the most issue with parking, surprisingly, is convenience stores. And it's not the number of spaces, but it's the layout of the spaces, because they may turn a parking, each spot may turn
Oh, every 3 minutes.
8, 9 times, 10 times in an hour.
Yeah,
So, so you want to make sure your spaces are located so people get in and out as quickly as possible. And that's not always the case, and that's where we run into problems in those areas. But But we have 4 spaces per 1,000 square feet, so many are like 2,000, 3,000 square feet.
This is Freeman, can I ask a question?
Yep,
I have 2 questions, actually. First, on the medical marijuana dispensary, that being listed here doesn't mean that we're permitting it, right? It just means that if we did permit it, that would be.
Right.
the law.
No, that's supposed to be taken out.
that's supposed to be taken out. That was put in when the old standards were there, yeah. So that would come out. Yep, I'm glad you picked it up.
And the second is, I think for a major facility like the manufacturing, if they ever had an issue with the parking, I would rather that we would just pass an ordinance, because those things take a long time and we got serious. We just simply modify this versus having something so elastic at the planning board level that then it almost takes away the real fight of these rules.
I'm not
understand.
I'm not sure I got your point. Could you just repeat that?
And maybe I misunderstand this, but it was suggested, well, what if we have a way that you could have an effective waiver or variance on some of these requirements? So maybe I should first ask, my understanding is that right now there is no variance process for these standards, or am I wrong?
No, that's
You're
correct, yeah.
Well,
I think it'd be better not to have a variance standard.
All right.
If something was compelling, like a big manufacturing facility with big investment, I'm sure that we would be able to get a variance to permit it, if the parking was an issue.
All right. I see.
I got
I see.
You know, I think these standards can't apply downtown.
they
No,
won't apply.
They
to-
won't, they won't.
Well-
In the downtown description for that district, it says, no,
So it
There's no
specifically
parking
says okay, so these are where applicable,
yeah, so it'd be in actually all areas of the town except for the downtown.
right,
Yeah, that's why they did that, because it,
yeah.
yeah. Is there
So,
anything? Go ahead.
going back to Freeman's point, can you put in there that rather than say that they don't have to do it and make them go for a variance, say that they have to show that they have an area designated for it for future parking, so that it just makes it less onerous on
Yeah,
them?
that's a possibility too. You still hold them to the requirement.
Hold them to the requirement,
They
but
will
not build
Build it
it.
out as necessary.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
That's something that could be done, yeah. And we could probably do that in the existing ordinance, as
Yes,
long as they specified it and they had it there.
right. Actually, just add on to that section, maybe where they talk about other uses not listed, maybe have just another thing saying,
Yep.
just a thought.
Is there anything else on the traffic, Article 9? Why don't we have time. Why don't we go to Article 7? These are general performance standards. And the first thing's buffering. We want to make sure that we have a buffering standard for parking areas. And basically, I'm not sure we specifically say parking, but we buffer on Route 1, buffering of residential uses.
Right, actually, there's, nothing here.
Incompatible uses.
But the buffering requirements for parking ought to be in here, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's actually just in a different part of this article. Let me go find it. You guys can go on with that. The parking standards not in
No, parking standards are in the road.
Article 9.
Yeah.
Okay, because I know in the current ordinance, parking standards in the general standard did say there was, I think, 8 feet away from property lines?
Oh, yeah, but we were talking about, that's the buffer, probably what we should say is that
Buffer between parking.
the vegetation or standards for, yeah, that is, there is an 8-foot setback from parking areas from side property lines. And and then a Route 1 buffer, 15 feet deep, is measured from property line. Parking prohibited within the buffer strip.
Okay, I got a couple things on this first page.
Sure.
7.1.2.1, where the planning board determines it is desirable and necessary. Desirable, I think, is a sort of an amorphous word. I mean, because is it possible for it to be necessary but not desirable?
I would say where the planning board determines,
Just determines it's necessary to protect.
yeah.
I'm thinking desirable just adds an element of doubt there.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's really an opinion.
yeah.
Right, yeah. Yes.
Well, it could be desirable, but not necessary.
Right, yeah.
It could be desirable or necessary to protect.
But, yeah. But again,
But again, it's still, it's
desirable
opinion.
is just,
Necessary implies you have to do it.
Yeah.
Desirable is maybe not.
Yeah, I would say it's necessary.
yeah. And then on, the second thing I had, on 7.1.2.3, it talks about all new commercial developments and for redevelopment of existing commercial properties. Is redevelopment, does that include expansion?
Let's make it clear, redevelopment and expansion.
Yeah.
Expansion, comma, and redevelopment,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a good point. Because redevelopment could insinuate something completely different here, changing.
Yeah, no, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one, yeah.
And then 7.1.2.4, planning board determines adjacent uses are incompatible. And I'm not, again, that's something that really has no standards to it. I mean, when is different, when is A and B, when do A and B, or when are they incompatible
Probably
as
when-
opposed to different?
Probably when if somebody comes in to complain about it at the hearing.
It states at the last sentence of it, in determining incompatible uses, planning board shall consider whether intensity of uses on site in question would cause an undue loss of quote-unquote quiet enjoyment. So I think.
Okay,
But I think it's meant to be like, junkyards next to someone's home, I guess.
yeah,
Shooting range, yeah.
I think you raise a good point, but I would say that while there's planning board discretion, the rule they apply is a limit of 25 feet. So I think they can only do so much, but I like the fact that there's some discretion because some of these issues really are, you can't, beyond a point, you have to actually see them to understand what they would actually have as a practical impact on the adjoining properties.
incompatible means,
Does that make any sense? Did you hear that?
Yeah.
incompatible means the yuck factor or something, anyway.
Let's rewrite that.
But some of that you can't codify.
Right.
We could just say the buffer strip should be a minimum of 25 feet in, 25 feet in width. The planning board may decide to increase the buffer width when it determines that the proposed use would be incompatible to the adjacent properties, such as due to,
Loss of quiet enjoyment.
yeah, so with the specific reasons that,
Yeah.
yeah.
Nuisance standards is defined by the, I think, state, like nuisance, odor, noise, we're talking about.
Right,
that.
yeah, noise, hours of operation.
Right.
So there's something that they could say, all right, this is gonna be open 24 hours a day.
And this is something that could, if you have the neighbors there, you could hash out it between
Yeah.
everybody and say, okay, yeah, we think 40 feet is great.
And that would give them the option to
To increase it.
the buffer width, yeah.
So very quickly, you were asking about parking and buffering. I think that's in Article 9. It's 9.3.2.4, landscape areas. It says, off-street parking and loading spaces where not enclosed within a building shall be effectively screened from view by a continuous landscaped area not less than 6 feet in height along exterior lot lines adjacent to residential property. Except that driveway shall be kept open to provide visibility for entering and leaving.
That's what we were gonna switch over,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's what
Yeah,
you're looking for?
yeah.
And that's what you want in general form.
Yeah. So all the buffering things are in one area. When we drop it here and there, it's when we lose it.
Yeah.
Let's rewrite that, just to make it clear. Because that does come up a lot. We have, on the next one, buffering of residential uses. And then screening.
Yeah.
And then we have some planting standards, fencing.
In there, I had, you have the phrase required landscaped area and below the finished landscape area. I assume that's a, per square feet. And I assume that's the dimension of the buffer zone?
What section are you?
7.1.3.3.
Gotcha, all right.
So you have the expression, the 300 square feet of, each 300 square feet of required landscaped area, and, another for each 200 square feet of finished landscaped area. And I think those terms need definitions.
Yeah, let's clarify that entire paragraph.
Yeah. I mean, my assumption was that you have a 25-foot wide buffer zone that extends for 150 feet.
Yeah,
You multiply those dimensions and come up with the square
that's
footage.
where, and we need to say that specifically.
Yeah.
And that's typically how you would do it. For every X amount of feet within the buffer area, there should be, you plant X amount of trees or whatever, yeah.
So, I mean, you just, anyway.
And then we have the maintenance, and then in landscaping at 7.1.5.
Yeah.
We have, we talk a little bit about parking lots in there, for the last sentence or two in that paragraph.
What's a 2.5 inch caliper? What's caliper mean?
That's the
track.
diameter of
The
the
diameter?
A 2.5 inch caliber is the minimum for a
Okay, no, it's
just
just,
tree, yeah.
as long as that's
Yeah.
an understood word.
Are you talking about the little device? Are you talking about the little device calipers that you?
Yes.
No, well, no,
That's-
it's the diameter of the tree.
Yeah, but that's the device they use, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's the measuring device,
It's
yeah.
caliper.
Yeah.
I learned something new.
Amazing, huh? I only know that because we have dealt with.
That's a pretty spindly tree.
It is, that's
Yeah.
pretty
No,
small.
that's, you know, it's about,
No, actually, it's a little thinner than that. Yeah. Not as much as you would think,
Yeah,
but it's the minimum necessary.
we just brought it home from Moose Crossing.
Yeah, actually for planting and longevity, it's a good thing to plant, but it just takes a while to grow. And we will insert the, or blend in the parking standard from Article 9 into here. Construction standards, these are the codes that we've adopted. We need to check with Stan, because we have the 2003 NFPA 101. Just need to verify which one is adopted. Same thing with the electric code too.
what I would suggest there, you might say it must meet all state adopted codes, including but not limited to the following. And because if the state
Yeah,
adopts something,
Do they change that frequently?
right, you know,
they usually keep, the codes are updated every 3 years, but the state's always behind because of the cost of buying the documents, so.
or anyway, or
Can you say the most recent?
The most recently adopted by the state, I think.
right. But the names might change, I mean, the dates on these things might change.
Yeah,
Yeah, and also we don't come out with this every year, right? You know, our big.
no,
No,
No, I mean,
So it could
If we
change
say
the
most-
day after we publish it, you know?
because Walterboro is required to meet the building code. So,
yeah, I would think,
yeah, because it's based on your population.
Yeah, because they weren't always,
Yeah.
So-
No, and that's been a moving target,
Right.
So we'll just find a way to word
I
it.
mean, you need some flexibility there,
Yeah,
that's all. I mean,
as long as they have to meet it anyway, but we'll just make sure the language matches.
or you could just say all construction must meet state codes applicable to the town of Waldeboro.
Yeah.
Without even enumerating what they are.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't technically have to. No. We'll find a way of. Electrical disturbances.
They are what they are.
And then historic village architectural standards. These are kind of performance-based.
I would say those are aspirational. I don't see a lot of,
Conforming to the standards.
I mean, it's just,
I mean, the only time they would come into play is when someone builds something.
and I thought we deliberately did them
Yeah.
as a little bit nebulous so that they wouldn't be hampered. Nobody would be,
That would be, that was
Too
the only way
onerous.
they
Yeah.
get something in here, yeah.
well, I mean, you know, I would think that someone wanted to build a brutalist style structure in town, you know, would run afoul of this. I mean, think of Boston City Hall, for example.
Yeah, oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
But again, I think it's hard to nail down anything specific. So as I say, this is sort of aspirational as opposed to,
What about
Well, actually, go ahead.
Is this relatively new? Because a lot of people complain about the sprawl law. But they, you know, the original plan was for the beautiful little
They built that,
facade, et cetera, so how the hell did that get through?
that was built prior to this.
That was the
Which building?
Really?
The Sproul Block.
It's probably,
Oh, it's Sprouwalk, yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, there's always been a lot of discussion. If they only used the same brick that they used from across the street, that would have made a world of a difference on that.
Well, you could just, you know, you can put something in here, and no structures will be more offensive than the Sprouwalk.
That's perfect.
Even if, you know, they almost could rescue it if they took the bottom part and made it sort of like a sidewalk shop thing,
Yeah.
which I guess was the original plan.
Net developable acreage calculation, it just defines what's unsuitable.
Well, I mean, basically what that says is that,
It's gotta be buildable,
yeah,
yeah, which isn't a bad thing.
no,
And then noise, we have a standard for noise based on sound levels at different times in the morning, during the day and in the evening.
you know, I have no idea what those mean quantitatively, but they're pretty explicit, so.
Yeah, this isn't a bad standard, because they give us a provision here is to be located in an area where daytime pre-development hourly level is equal to or less than. It gives us an ability to be very practical in how we,
Yeah, you know, it's,
and we measure it at the property level.
right.
And then lighting, you know, this is basic.
Resources uses in rural areas, is it chainsaws and,
I'm sorry, what?
there's, following uses shall be exempt. Oh, okay, never mind. Yeah,
That would be a, you know, a harvester or a tractor.
yeah, chainsaws, yeah. Okay,
And then lighting requirements are basic, but we have a cutoff requirement, shielding to provide being cut off no more than 75 degrees. And we have a requirement to shield or hood.
well, do all the, I assume that the requirements enumerated sort of provide a definition for strong dazzling light?
No, that's a term of,
Yeah, that's,
that's one area of, typically, if it's shielded or hooded, it should eliminate the possibility of being a light that's focused on your eyes, but it all depends on how it's placed. You can meet the standard in terms of the height, but depending on, typically we get complaints if you're on a road and you're approaching this light, and that the light fixture itself might meet the standards, but as you're approaching it on the angle or height, it creates a nuisance, so.
well, I mean, if you had a laser, you know, I mean, that would be the extreme example of strong dazzling.
Some of those mercury vapor
Oh,
lights,
there's
you know, they're just so brilliant, those are the ones that are
I mean,
typically,
I just, when I look at these things, and the phrases are used like that, I mean, what pops to mind is how do you enforce that?
well, if it's shielded or hooded, and the cutoff is no more than 75 degrees, that way, that typical mercury light wouldn't be allowed, because it spreads its light.
But, you know, those standards are pretty clear,
Yeah,
but the strong dazzling is not clear to me. I mean, I might know it when I see it, but you might not think it was either.
it's subjective.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know what else we could do. Like I said, we could take that out, because if it is a shielded or hooded, we should not have a problem with it. Typically, we shouldn't have a problem with it. Refuse disposal, pretty standard stuff.
Sanitary stuff looks pretty,
Yeah. Sanitary provisions, but they all have to meet the subsurface waste disposal rules. We have a requirement here if there's a common system, if there's a homeowners association to cover that. Commercial or industrial waste.
Okay, so a question on, so like we built a camp and we put a composting toilet in and there was no problem with that. Is it-
That's covered in the pump code.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Menominee River discharges. This has been on the book since they removed the treatment inlet. If development will use more than 33 1/3% available excess capacity, any portion of shall pay for the replacement. This would come into play is where someone builds, attaches to the sewer system, and that leg or stretch they use, they take up the capacity of, if there's a pump or the sewer main, if
Well,
they,
it's excess capacity.
yes,
Yeah.
if they exceed that, then
Not,
they
not
have
the,
to,
not the total capacity.
not the total capacity, you know. So that they would, and that's something that would be done when they're issuing the,
Right.
working with the sewer district.
I mean, for an example, if the current use on the system is 80% of capacity, you couldn't add more than 6% to that.
No.
Yeah.
And a lot of that depends on the, yes, Friedman?
Under 7.9.4, what are the standards? Are they somewhere else here? Are they state standards for the treatment of industrial waste?
Yeah, we would defer to the state, and also we have rules in our treatment facility for what we can accept. And typically for an industrial use, we require the industry or the applicant to create a pre-treatment plan. And that's all codified.
Should we refer, without having a lot of detail, should we refer to the other parts of ordinance and state law that say refer to what those standards are by number?
I don't think we need to, because that's a separate, this is just kind of standard language in here. We could just say, or commercial industrial waste discharged into the municipal sewer shall meet the requirements of the town of Waldemar Sewer District, that's all, and regulations of the state of Maine.
Yeah, that's what I'd like.
Yeah, I mean, that would be another way of just, because we, in this.
Not a lot of detail, just what it
Yeah.
refers to.
Yeah, that would do what this does.
Okay.
Actually, yeah, that would be. Yeah, that would, take this paragraph down to, I'm sorry.
Sorry, not knowing what you're talking about, not really knowing the whole length of the Madonna River. Treated industrial waste discharges shall be prohibited above head of tide. In other words, they're not prohibited elsewhere. That's what that sounds like to me. I'm not familiar with the layout and who's on the river, but that seems odd.
Well,
In other words, it's okay every place else. Where is the head of the tide exactly? Does that move?
Oh, the head of the tide, that's,
Main Street, basically?
yeah, right up over here, yeah. The answer to your question is yes, you can discharge into a river if you get a state or federal permit, depending on what you're putting in, how it's treated, how clean it is, so, yeah.
Have those standards been tightened in this day and age?
Well, no, there are state or federal standards that,
Yeah.
they would have to be.
It seems, it seems that, in some places they are strict, and other places they ignore it.
Well, the state of Maine's pretty strict.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
On signs, the town, I didn't look, the town updated their sign ordinance, Max?
They updated it, I believe, in 2006. It was about a year before we got it.
Yeah.
So 2016 probably.
What's this reference here? Article 7F9.
That would have to be updated to whatever we're gonna make.
Yeah, okay.
Shoreline zoning.
And is similar issue on roof signs.
Yep.
Yeah, we're gonna do that last. When we get everything codified, we'll go back.
To make sure.
That happens throughout the entire. Yeah, we're gonna have to do some research in 710 Max 3.3.
Right.
Yeah, just,
Oh, 3.
yeah, 3.3.414.
3.3. Oh, the ones that require.
Right, yeah.
Require permits.
Yeah,
So what about, you have painted signs over a structure on 710.2.4. So, but do we allow, like, sides of buildings to have art on them? Are they considered
that may not be
signage?
considered a sign.
Okay.
It may be, yeah.
That's,
If it's artwork, if
if it doesn't advertise something?
it doesn't
Okay.
advertise, yeah. Anything about signs?
Suppose somebody wanted to put a mural on the side of the building, that they really allowed them everything, would they have to come to you?
I don't think so. I think the signs are meant more for
It's for advertising.
business, yeah. Like even this ordinance, I'm sorry though, I think even this ordinance, it's kind of giving that distinction between the two where the signs not requiring permits are more like temporary or sort of,
If the mural is just art
yeah.
and doesn't relate to the,
The signs that usually
Yeah,
require,
most of them, they don't
Yeah.
push anything, some of them are political, but.
Yeah.
right. The signs that usually require permits are the ones that are more focused on, like saying, my business is here type thing.
Yeah.
Like, if you're just doing a piece of art on the side,
it doesn't trigger this.
I was thinking that they're getting enormous, the whole entire side of the building.
There are towns that had people, candy stripe their, or whatever, on that. But no, you're free to do that.
Because I would almost put it in that category of stained glass windows type thing. That's where at least I put that type of category. Because it's part of the building.
It is art.
Yeah.
Question on temporary signs. Sorry to change
No,
the,
actually, if I can quickly
Yep.
just get that.
Sorry.
Actually, your thing is here, 7.10.3.3.14, creative architectural design in public art shall not be considered signs if they.
Oh, good.
We just need to find out what the rest of it is.
That's right, we had that talk a
Yeah.
while back, yeah.
Yeah, I just need to have more.
The temporary signs, do we have a time limit for temporary signs? Like a 2-week period or something, or?
I think it depends on the sign itself, because at least political signs, I think they have to be taken down.
Right, yep, the
Yeah.
political signs we talk about, but we don't have, I didn't see anything for if you're
For the
having
temporary.
like a sale or a, I don't know what else could be.
That's addressed in here someplace.
Yeah, I thought it was too.
I didn't see it.
We're talking about the signs not requiring permits, or are we talking?
No, just a
No.
temporary sign.
Yeah,
A
not-
time limit for how long it would stay up.
I thought I saw that someplace.
Yeah, I know, me too. Maybe it was the one, the promotional sign thing that Max was.
Yeah, the political sign thing
30-day
is,
limit for promotion shall not apply to window signs.
oh,
So, well, I'm sorry. it's a sentence.
Yeah, but it doesn't
Shall
include,
not be in place more than 30 days per promotion. That's,
but that doesn't cover temporary signs, does it?
no, that's promotional signs, and that's under temporary signs category.
Is it?
Yeah, because 7.10.
Oh, that's right,
Temporary
yeah.
signs, 21 makes it promotional. But
Can we title that 710.4.1 temporary and promotional signs, just to make it clear? Does everyone think about that?
well,
Say that again?
Under, we have the section for temporary signs, and then right below is promotional signs. If we could just title
Yes. I think-
temporary and
yes.
promotional.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Because a temporary sign could be, I'm gonna occupy a business for a month during Christmas.
right, a pop-up sign, yep. Yep, and then we have the other one talking about the 15 days before the
Right.
event, which that covers everything then.
Yeah. Oh, you can advertise sandwiches here too. Subway signs. Subway, that started in Bridgeport, Connecticut.
Yeah, by dentists, wasn't it? Wasn't it a couple of dentists that
Yeah.
started it?
And anything else on signs? And then the last thing in this section is storage of materials.
It struck me in the third paragraph that you might want an exception for temporary use on construction sites, dumpsters.
I feel that was
In
something.
terms of the screening,
Oh, I see what you mean, yeah.
screening, yeah.
I feel there is under specific standards, I feel there is something for temporary construction.
I thought
Is
there
there-
was
I think for
two.
specific standards, though, but I'll make a note just in case there is.
Yeah.
So, all right.
Yeah, we could just put a separate sentence in that paragraph saying,
Yeah,
yeah, construction dumpster would be, are not included, yeah. and we need to do environmental standards, and we'll start on the specific performance standards.
Okay.
I know we've had to make some modifications to the communication towers to adjust some changes in the federal law. And I know we had discussed eliminating some of the things going to the planning board for when they put on an antenna, and they don't affect the height or something like that, yeah. And we need to have a discussion about, we limit the location of towers, and we may need to think about that, because with 5G and more access coming on, there'll be a demand for more tower space, more antenna space on towers, and we limit them to just a few areas, so we're gonna have to discuss that, see how that plays out.
Are we done?
The next meeting's the 13th?
Environmental standards,
Yeah.
or are you pushing that out?
We'll push that out.
Yeah, we'll get that sent out before the next meeting.
July 13th? Is that,
Well, shoreline zoning's done already, that was just approved. We're not proposing any changes to hazardous materials or wellhead protection district at all.
When,
Because we also have different there's floodplain management, there's hazardous materials, there's
Yeah,
wellhead protection,
yeah,
there's a few different that.
yeah. Floodplain, we're gonna take out of this ordinance and put it into its own,
so
separate.
my reason for being here is the shoreline zoning and the commercial boating, the marine resource district. So I don't.
Yeah, that's, since they just changed that, we'll look at,
Okay.
yeah, that'll still be on, yeah. The other one is, and then we have to go back to the use chart and the definitions.
Yeah.
So we're about August, I guess, potentially, we'll get to that.
Okay.
So July 13th?
Yep, July 13th, 6
All right, good.
p.m.
Good. I don't think I can make even a motion because we don't have a
so
quorum.
moved.
Good, yay.
Oh, yeah, second.
Well, it's kind of irrelevant, isn't it?
Freeman's still on there.
Hi, Freeman.
Oh, I think he might be off.
Freeman's
Freeman, are you still there?
He's there.
Is he there?
13, 6 o'clock.
Yep.
Yep, 6 o'clock, yep.
July 13th, yes.